fight fans? Welcome back to episode 6 of Puncher's Chance. I'm Anthony Balester, obviously joined by Brett Cagle. We got a lot to talk about. Last week, I absolutely nailed the prediction with Belal Muhammad over Leon Edwards, but we have a lot of other stuff to break down as well. But definitely make sure that you're following the Puncher's Chance podcast on all social medias at Punch ETB. Make sure to follow the Empty the Bench podcast network on Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at ETB Network. Make sure you're also following our YouTube channel at youtube.com/ETB Network for all of our shows and all of our other ETB Network shows. If you can't watch Puncher's Chance, then take us on the road and listen to us wherever you can.
Puncher's Chance is presented by Playback. Watching sports is more fun with others, but we spend too much of our time watching alone. Playback is a virtual space where communities can stream live sports together with everyone perfectly synced up. Creators can hop on stage, deliver their own play-by-play analysis and commentary, and invite viewers for Q&A. Playback makes watching sports fully interactive and a social experience. From playing fantasy sports, repping your favorite players and teams, and watching the commentators and communities you care about, win or lose, sports are best enjoyed together. Join our community by going to playback.tv/ETB Network to find out more, including our live stream schedule.
So, Brett, of course, we're going to start with the top. Belal Muhammad, shocked the world. He didn't shock me, though. I had that, definitely nailed. I don't know what it is, Brett. I'm just, I've been a huge fan of Belal Muhammad for a while, so I really, really know his game, and I've been really, really confident in him. And I just, from day one, I had him picked. Even when they announced the fight, I was like, you know what? I'm going to go with Belal. So I had that coming in, and he won exactly how I thought. He was slamming Leon Edwards all over the place. Was pretty much successful at every one of his takedown attempts. But I did say that he would, throw enough strikes to keep him honest and, make those, grappling attempts more successful. But honestly, in terms of the striking, I think Belal Muhammad exceeded my own expectations. He was really, really dominating in the striking game. In fact, I think he outstriked Leon Edwards in this matchup, which is something a lot of people didn't see coming. I'm not sure. Leon Edwards said maybe he was tired and it was the time zone wise. But that's really no excuse. Belal Muhammad was dealing with the exact same thing, and Belal Muhammad looked well rested. And he looked like the guy that wanted to win the title. He looked like the guy that was willing to put his life on the line to win that fight. And I'm really glad he came on top. He's had a long path, and I think there's not a guy in that division that deserves it more. I had, 48-47 for Belal. I thought he won the first 2 rounds decisively. Leon Edwards, I think, got the 3rd round. Belal got the 4th. I think the 5th was really close. I may side with Leon because of those elbows at the end, but ultimately, Belal won at least 3, if not 4 of those rounds. So Belal now is the welterweight champion, like I expected. But now it's like, what's next for Belal? Should he enjoy the title? Should he fight, Shavkat? Honestly, I would like to see him take a little bit of time off, let Shavkat and Jack Dellella fight a number 1 contenders match at the end of the year, and then let Belal fight them next year. But what were your thoughts on this fight, Brett, and who do you want to see next for him?
Yeah, you really did call this fight almost perfectly. And honestly, Belal Muhammad showed how well-rounded of a mixed martial artist he is. His striking on the feet really complemented his takedowns. I thought that the pressure really gave Leon Edwards, fits on the feet. Leon is a guy who's a very technical kickboxer. He looks for strikes at range, like the jab and the body kick. He was able to land the body kick at times, even in the first round. But Belal Muhammad cut off distance. He pushed his back against the fence and made him fight off his back foot for the entirety of the fight. Leon Edwards did control one of those rounds on the ground, and you had to give it to him. And then potentially the 5th round, it really wasn't a close fight, even if it was scored 3-2, which I had it. Belal Muhammad won his rounds by a larger margin than I felt that Edwards did. And, I thought it was a good fight. I thought that Belal Muhammad made history and showed everybody, how tough and how good of a mixed martial artist he really is. But honestly, if you think about it, Anthony, he might be the most discounted champion or, put off champion. People go out there and say he sucks in this sort of stuff when he goes out and, beats guys like Sean Brady and Gilbert Burns and proves his worth. But there's no denying Belal Muhammad right now. And he's the best welterweight in the world. And whether he fights Shavkat Rakhmonov or Jack Della Maddalena, I think that either of those are going to be really good fights. And Belal Muhammad just looked fantastic last Saturday.
Yeah, he definitely looked fantastic. And I know we mentioned on the podcast before, one thing that made me real confident in Bilal Muhammad is the training and friendship that he has with Khabib Nurmagomedov, the other Nurmagomedovs, and Islam Makhachev. He's been training in the same gym as those guys. And honestly, Brett, when you saw Bilal Muhammad out there slamming Leon Edwards, did you get a little bit of glimpse of Khabib? He looked a lot like Khabib out there the way he was slamming him, did he?
Yeah, and he looked like, you remember when John Jones picked Daniel Cormier up and and tossed him too, and how Daniel Cormier picked up Dan Henderson and tossed him. It kind of looked like that, man. And Bilal Muhammad now is coming from a long line of Midwest welterweight champions with Matt Hughes and Robbie Lawler, and he's going to have a chance to cement his legacy of his own here and maybe be a UFC Hall of Famer one day.
Yeah, 100%. I know he's talking about being the best welterweight of all time. I know he's got a lot to accomplish. But honestly, I think once you become champion UFC, it's pretty hard to deny, especially if you get one title defense, to deny you being in the Hall of Fame. There's not many guys who become champion. I think winning a championship in UFC is harder than, winning a Super Bowl or winning a Stanley Cup. One guy gets to have it, and you got to beat that guy every time to win it. And Bilal went out there and proved the doubters wrong. But Brett, would you say, obviously, people are talking Shavkat, and me and you mentioned on the podcast before, we think Shavkat Rakhmonov might be the best welterweight we've ever seen. And obviously we'd probably, side with Rakhmonov in that potential matchup. But after this matchup with Bilal and his performance, would you be more confident now in Bilal against Shavkat?
Yeah, I think that's a lot more of an interesting fight than people thought it was a week ago. You go and look how Bilal Muhammad just outstruck Leon Edwards. I don't know if Shavkat Rakhmonov's boxing is up to the ability that we just saw Bilal Muhammad's hands last weekend, So maybe on the feet, Bilal Muhammad would be able to land punches similarly to like what he did against Leon Edwards and give Shavkat Rakhmonov trouble. But Shavkat Rakhmonov is a tough guy to back up against the fence. And with that grappling ability, I believe it's just as good or maybe even better than Muhammad's. So I think that's a really interesting fight, one that's going to be having to be broke down for a while. But I like Shavkat Rakhmonov, and Jack Della Maddalena is a good contender too. It's a different fight with Jack because Jack's a heavy-handed guy, and Bilal obviously, similarly to what he did last weekend, would have to try and take the fight to the ground and then open up the striking with the wrestling. But in this one, Bilal Muhammad landed 8 takedowns in this fight, outstruck Leon Edwards by over 50 total strikes. So he really put on a masterclass, and this was a performance no one expected. To me, Leon Edwards seemed dismissive of Bilal Muhammad, even at the press conference leading into this fight, was saying, it's just Bilal Muhammad. You're no Khabib. But then he goes and gets slammed in the first round. So, some of these fights where you have Israel Adesanya kind of being dismissive of Sean Strickland or Edwards being dismissive of Bilal Muhammad, it gives me a little cause for concern, especially as we go into those fights, them not really respecting their opponent or respecting their skills.
Yeah, and who knows? That may be playing a part into Bilal Muhammad's success. It doesn't matter what he accomplishes. He still gets underrated and overlooked in each fight. And who knows? Maybe that's going to play a part in a potential matchup with Shavkat. Everybody's going to pick Shavkat, and they're probably going to overlook him again. But, a lot of people, Brett, don't think Shavkat deserves a title match. They don't think he's beat a top contender. He's beat Wonder Boy. But has he really been a top guy contender? So a lot of people are saying, is there a guy right now for Bilal? Or is there some matchups we need to have happen before Bilal has a guy who deserves to fight? Usman, he's coming off back-to-back losses. You can't give it to him. Ian Gary's probably a couple fights away. So I would prefer them, like I said before, but I think they need to have, Jack Della fight Shavkat in number 1 contenders match. And I think give Bilal some time to enjoy the title shot. And I think the winner of that will definitely solidify themselves as a true title contender.
Yeah, I think there's a couple different fights for Shavkat Rakhmonov. And if I'm Dana White in the UFC right now, I let Bilal Muhammad kind of take his lap on the sun and kind of celebrate his world championship for a couple months. He really had to take the long road to get this title, overcame eye pokes, overcame young undefeated contenders like Sean Brady. This was no easy path to the title, and he had to win 8 or 9 fights in a row to even get his chance at UFC Gold. So, I think that Jack and Shavkat is a good fight. Also, I believe that Kamaru Usman and Shavkat Rakhmonov would be a good fight. I want to see Usman drop back down to 170 pounds. I obviously don't think he's a contender at 185. He lost to Hamzat up there. He just fought Hamzat, who everybody was afraid to fight. Well, Usman's going to take on all comers. At that case, why don't you have him fight Shavkat Rakhmonov, who nobody seems to want to take a fight with right now. And honestly, if I'm Jack Della Maddalena, I wouldn't want to fight Shavkat Rakhmonov before I had the title either, because I think that's kind of a matchup nightmare for Jack.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of stuff you said. There's definitely a lot of options, and definitely a lot of matchups. And it seems like we both agree that there's not really a guy out there right now. There has to be some fights made to really determine who that fight's going to be. But on the other side, the last thing we need to speak about before we move on, Leon Edwards. Obviously, since that fight was so one-sided, UFC already stated Dana White does not want to do an immediate rematch. Bilal already stated, Leon Edwards made Bilal wait a long time to get his rematch. So Bilal's not going to do Leon any favors to get him a rematch anytime soon.
Yeah,
But honestly,
years.
So honestly, for Leon, he's definitely going to need probably 2 solid performances to get back in title contention. But for potential matchups for him, Brett, what about him versus Ian Gary? Ian Gary formerly used to train at his gym. And, unfortunately, he doesn't train at that gym anymore. And there's a little bit of controversy of Leon Edwards kicking Ian Gary out of that gym. So there's a little bit of bad blood between the two. I think that's a good matchup for Ian Gary. And I think Leon Edwards coming off the loss, he's going to have to fight one of these up-and-comers. And I think that's a perfect matchup for where both guys are in their careers.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said. I think that's the matchup to make for Leon Edwards. Now, honestly, I think it was such a disappointing performance from Edwards. He entered as a 3-1 favorite, at online sports books. And, odds makers really, I think, put too much stock into that first fight with Belal Muhammad. Yes, he rocked Muhammad with that head kick, but Muhammad took his best shot and kept coming. Also, that eye poke that he landed on Muhammad, it doesn't help his stock when he goes in there and he does that thing. It's not like he went in there and beat Belal Muhammad cleanly. He rocked him one time in the first round and won one round of a 5-round fight. So it was completely new story. Muhammad came in with a different game plan and looked tremendous. I was really disappointed with Leon Edwards, and I think that Dana White was as well. If you listen to him at the press conference, he was kind of just up in arms about the situation, said Muhammad looked good, but that it wasn't a barn burner. So I thought that it was a good fight, and it was a very close fight, 3-2. But Muhammad just did too much in those 3 rounds. The 2 rounds that Leon won, I thought he won pretty narrowly outside the round that he won with the grappling. But Muhammad was just too much in the first round in the other 2 rounds. So, yeah, congratulations to Belal Muhammad. He becomes the first UFC champion from Chicago and also the first UFC champion of Palestinian descent. So a lot of history made with that victory on Saturday.
Yeah, I definitely think Dana White would have preferred Leon Edwards to win. I think he put a lot of stock in Leon Edwards' future and trajectory. I think they already kind of had him penciled in to win this fight, and they already kind of had future matches picked. And I think also what this hurts too is we're going to speak about him later in the show, but Islam Makhachev has been talking about wanting to move up to 170. Well, if Belal Muhammad is the champion, he's not going to fight Belal Muhammad, who's a very close friend of his. So that kind of basically wipes out a potential, high-selling matchup. And, we could have got it Islam Makhachev versus Leon Edwards. But now we won't get that matchup, and there's some other matchups we're not going to get. And it's going to be interesting to see, now that Belal Muhammad is the champion, you can't deny him main events. So it's going to be interesting to see how, the UFC didn't like, putting Belal Muhammad in main events. But now you kind of have no choice. So it's going to be interesting to see. But Belal Muhammad, as we said before, has done everything that's going to be coming his way.
Yeah, and the UFC has not been back to Chicago in 5 years. Now they have a champion and maybe a pay-per-view main event headliner with Belal Muhammad. So hopefully we get a fight card with the UFC here in Chicago. It's been quite a while.
Yeah, I would absolutely love that. And who wouldn't want to see the UFC, in Chicago? We also had another title fight, one that was much quicker and didn't go the distance. Tom Aspinall continues his reign, getting a TKO over Curtis Blades to retain the interim heavyweight championship. Tom Aspinall, man, he walked through Curtis Blades, and Curtis Blades is not a guy you just walk through. He's a really tough opponent, and this was a tough matchup for Aspinall coming in, but Aspinall made Curtis Blades look like every one of his other opponents, got him out there pretty quick. That's why Aspinall holds the record for the shortest average time in UFC, approximately around 2 minutes. He's finishing these guys very, very quick. And at this point, there's no denying that him and John Jones have to fight. I know we have to get the Stipe Miocic and John Jones fight. But as Dana White said, the winner of that's going to most likely fight Aspinall. He said if Stipe wins, he retires. But we know John Jones is going to win that fight easily. John Jones is going to try to duck and dodge Aspinall as much as he wants. But at this point, there's no more ducking and dodging him. John Jones is the GOAT of the sport for a reason. But, with Aspinall, with the striking he has, he shows that he has power to knock out guys. But he also showed that if he needs to get on the ground, he could grapple with the best of them as well. And he's so explosive and so fast and athletic for a big guy that he might be the first guy, Brett, that I can honestly say I might pick over John Jones. But what were your thoughts on this, Brett, and what do you see how this heavyweight division going?
I will be picking Tom Aspinall over John Jones if that matchup takes place. And I think that Tom Aspinall cemented his place to be next for the UFC Heavyweight Championship. A lot of people are talking about Alex Pereira. Alex Pereira didn't go and knock out Curtis Blaydes in a minute. So, I mean, Alex Pereira is knocking these guys out. Yes, Prochazka's getting into the second round on him. Jamal Hill's getting into the second round on him. Nobody can get out of the first round with Tom Aspinall. He's the best finisher that the heavyweight division's seen in quite a while. Took out Sergey Pavlovich in the first round. Took out Curtis Blaydes again this last weekend in a minute flat. And he also has submission ability. I think that Tom Aspinall against John Jones is a very interesting matchup because Tom Aspinall can stop the takedown. If he can stop the takedown of John Jones, we're going to see what John's hands look like up at 250 pounds at 37 years old. And we see what Tom's looking like with his boxing, going out here and taking guys out, who are very powerful individuals themselves. So Tom Aspinall to me is incredibly impressive. I compared him to a prime kind of Cain Velasquez last week. I think that's, pretty comparable. Cain Velasquez in his prime was a tremendous finisher and was able to get guys out of there in relatively short order, and also had a great gas tank. We haven't seen the gas tank of Tom Aspinall yet, but I think that it might be tested against John Jones. But Tom comes in a tremendous physical shape. He's not a fat individual. He's very well put together. So I think that he's going to have good cardio as well. He's just so good, and his skills are so advanced against some of these guys, especially in the striking, that he's able to get him out of there even with a jab like we saw against Curtis Blaydes.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said, Brett. A lot of these matchups that they talk about for John Jones, like you said, Alex Pereira, who I love. Alex Pereira, I'm going to be honest with you, is my favorite fighter. I'm a huge fan of his. But he's got no grappling. I know his takedown defense has improved, but if he fights John Jones, it's going to be just like Ciryl Gane's fight. I did like Francis Ngannou, but I think the same thing with Francis Ngannou, would be the same thing with Ciryl Gane. John Jones is going to take those guys to the ground. He's not going to try to strike with them. He's going to get them out with submission. But Tom Aspinall, has a mixture of both, and that's what makes him so dangerous for John Jones. And he also is a natural heavyweight. Alex Pereira, yeah, he was obviously monstrous for 185, and he is a big light heavyweight. But at the end of the day, even if he's not doing any weight cut and he puts on some mass, he's only going to be about 245, 250, and that's him being all blown up. Tom Aspinall is naturally walking around at 255, 260 with all the explosiveness and not having to put on weight. We don't know if Alex Pereira puts on too much weight. Is he going to slow down? Is his cardio going to mess up? Aspinall already has that. Like you said, the only question we have with Aspinall is his cardio. And is maybe the short time of his fights going to factor in the fact that he hasn't had one of these really grind out long fights and in these long, wars where he's in the trenches and in deep waters. That might be one thing that might favor John Jones with all the championship fights and experience. He's got a lot of rounds under his belt. So that might be one thing that may favor him. But, I don't think John Jones can duck him. And honestly, Brett, I can't wait to see his fight. And, sooner the better.
Yeah, Tom Aspinall is quickly becoming one of my favorite fighters. I even love the call out that he had for John Jones. He came at it very respectfully. He said, John, I don't have anything against you, but I think I can beat you in a fight. And, that's what it's all about, man. Tom Aspinall is quickly becoming one of my favorite fighters. I even liked his call out of John Jones after the win. It was nothing. He said it was nothing personal. He just thought he could beat him in a fight. He comes at it really respectfully, and I appreciate that. But also in the post-fight press conference, Aspinall said that they should do a two-man tournament, him versus Pereira, Jones versus Miocic, and the winners fight each other in the same night, kind of like how they used to do in Pride back in the day with the four-man tournaments. That would be awesome as a fight fan. That hasn't happened in 20 years. And what do you think about that idea?
I absolutely love it, Brett. I think every fight fan will love it. I know the UFC would never do it, but hey, why not do this? Why not do that? But make the pay-per-view twice the price. Make the pay-per-view $200 because you're getting 2 pay-per-views for the in one night. And honestly, Brett, I would pay the price of 2 pay-per-views to watch those fights.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be interesting. You'd have the 2 veterans going against one another, against the 2 guys looking to make a name for themselves and move up and become the official undisputed heavyweight champion. That would be incredible. Hasn't happened since Pride back in the day, but I don't think it will happen. But I think Tom Aspinall beats every single one of those guys right now if it was in the situation. If they wanted to, I don't think they would have Tom Aspinall defend the interim championship once again on the same card as John Jones and Miocic. I think that's probably the closest that we could get if maybe he got scheduled with Pereira, but that's probably out of the realm of possibility. So, Tom Aspinall is next for John Jones, in my opinion, and I don't really want to hear any opinions about Alex Pereira moving up until that fight happens.
Yeah, and I think Dana White even chimed in on that. Basically said, there's a lot of stuff to happen in heavyweight. Alex Pereira already's got enough to go on in light heavyweight. He might as well stay down there, even if he does beat Ankalaev. Wait for some contenders. And honestly, Brett, like I said, I'm the biggest Alex Pereira fan, but I think he's really going to really struggle with these big guys that could grapple like a Tom Aspinall or even a Curtis Blades. I think he would even struggle with Curtis Blades. And Curtis Blades would take him down and really use that size on him. But Tom Aspinall is at the top of the world. He may be the interim champion, but in my mind and in my head, he's the actual heavyweight champion and the best heavyweight on the planet.
Yeah, and Curtis Blades even said so in the media coverage leading up to this in fight week. He said that if Alex Pereira moved up to heavyweight, he'd have problems with elite grapplers like him in Jailton Almeida, and he thought that he'd be able to take Pereira down pretty easily and beat him up. And obviously, styles make fights. Tom Aspinall is a guy that's hard to take down, and Curtis Blades didn't really attempt to take him down. And that's kind of the thing with Tom is he can get you out of there with your hands before you even attempt that first takedown. So it's really tricky to stay on the feet with him. You almost have to have guys go out there with reckless abandon like a Khamzat Chimaev and start shooting at ankles from the opening bell at this point, especially unless you're an elite striker like a Ciryl Gane and you want to go back and forth with him. But, Tom Aspinall is completely well-rounded and is a complete threat to John Jones and his legacy.
And I know John Jones has fought a lot of great fighters, and he stated he's got the best resume. He's fought a lot of former champions. He's beaten great fighters like Daniel Cormier. But Tom Aspinall, is going to have a lot of problems for John Jones. And I honestly think Tom Aspinall will be the toughest challenge for John Jones in his entire career. And I think that fight can have a lot to do with the legacy of the UFC and the GOAT debate. I think if John Jones wins that fight, he's undoubtedly going to be retired as the GOAT. No one's ever going to catch him. If Aspinall wins that fight and goes on and, defends the UFC heavyweight title a bunch of times and retires with his only loss in the freak accident against Blades, he's probably going to go down as the GOAT. So this is going to have a lot of legacy on it, and, man, I can't wait.
Yeah, the UFC would have a new star in the making in Tom Aspinall and somebody that would be the face of an entire promotion, basically, in England. For them to have a heavyweight champion like this, that means a lot to that part of the world. And they pack stadiums routinely for Tom Aspinall and Leon Edwards and Paddy Pimblett. So good for Tom Aspinall, and I hope he gets the fight.
Yeah, and one last thing I want to say, Brett, before we move on, now that you mentioned in terms of marketing, I honestly feel like the UFC has failed Tom Aspinall in terms of marketing and promoting him. I feel like they could be doing a lot better job of doing it. Errol Hawani even said it best. They're really not promoting him. He's a company guy. He's a family man. He does everything right. He doesn't cheat the game. He doesn't cheat the fans. He's an exciting fight. He's an exciting fighter. And I think the reason why the UFC has not promoted him is because of John Jones. They know John Jones is overly sensitive, and Dana White doesn't want to do anything to jeopardize that relationship. He knows if you piss off John Jones, he's just going to walk away and not fight anymore. Yeah. UFC don't want to risk that. So honestly, I think they're not promoting Aspinall because of Jones. But once Jones loses to Aspinall, it's going to be all Aspinall, and he'll become the face of the company.
Yeah, John Jones is, I hate to say it, but John Jones plays by his own rules, and he's earned them. He's a guy like Mike Tyson that, Mike Tyson walked to the beat of his own drum, especially even after he lost to Buster Douglas. He would get routine championship opportunities against Lennox Lewis past his prime. the second fight with Holyfield, and they'd still try and get him to, you'd have to appease to what Mike wanted. And, you kind of have to appease to what John Jones wants, because he is the draw. He is, who's bringing the fans in to watch, and he is the greatest of all time. So I understand the position that Dana's in, but they did waste a significant amount of time in Tom Aspinall's career. And we see how good he's looked against Sergey Pavlovich and how good he looked last weekend. If he could have had 2 or 3 performances, in between in these last 2 years, who knows where he'd be at. But I think he'd probably have cleaned out the division by now. So Tom Aspinall, I think that the sky's the limit for him.
Yeah, you're definitely right, Brett. And like they always say in boxing, right now John Jones is the A side, and when you're the A side, you get to call all the shots. Yeah. But we also had some other great fights. We got to talk about Paddy Pimblett. Paddy the Baddy's finally found his way into a ranked position and has finally moved up into the top 15. Definitely a fight that me and you predicted correctly. We didn't think Paddy Pimblett would get the finish. We thought he'd win this by decision. But man, what a mistake by Bobby Green to try to go for that takedown and playing right into Paddy's hands and going right into that submission. What were your thoughts about that, Brett? And what do you think about that bonehead move by Bobby Green?
Man, Paddy Pimblett made a statement, and he just looked fantastic. That was a legendary performance that people will be talking about his entire career. Bobby Green, I know he got finished by Jalen Turner pretty viciously at the end of last year, but he looked great against Jim Miller. He turned back guys like Grant Dawson, who were 19-1 going into that fight that he had with Bobby Green. And really the thing that stuck out the most to me is that Paddy Pimblett made Bobby Green feel so uncomfortable that he had to shoot for takedowns. And it's not like Paddy was going for or was going at some knockout win or something like that, or was really damaging Bobby Green. It was kind of a tactical fight until Green shot for the takedown. But once he did, Paddy Pimblett put that triangle on and showed that there was a grappling advantage significantly. I think that Paddy Pimblett's grappling has been really underrated. It really stuck out to me when he submitted Jordan Levitt. Levitt was a guy who, had a slam knockout win and was a good grappler in his own right. And Paddy Pimblett, went down there and beat him by rear naked choke. So, I would like to see Paddy Pimblett fight a guy like Benoit Saint Denis, who is also great on the ground. I'd like to see what Paddy's got on the feet for a significant amount of time, probably 15 minutes. If he fought Benoit, it might be a 5-round fight. Could potentially be a fight night in England even. But I thought that Paddy Pimblett made a statement. He looked the best he's ever looked. He's big for this weight class. He's about 6 foot tall at 155 pounds. He looked at least 10 pounds bigger than Bobby Green. Now, ESPN had them as the same height at 5'10". They did not look the same size in there on fight night or even close to it. So I think that Paddy Pimblett's really been counted out. I don't know if he'd be able to take guys down like Justin Gaethje. He might struggle with guys like that on the feet.
Yeah, I thought it was a statement win for Paddy Pimblett and a legendary performance over Bobby King Green. So, credit to Paddy Pimblett. He electrified the London crowd once again. He was an underdog in this one, and I didn't really think there was any way he was going to lose, especially at home. What'd you make of his performance, and who would you like to see him fight next, Anthony?
I was very, very impressed. Like we always said, we know Paddy Pimblett's a great grappler. He's super, super tough, and he's always an improving striker. Honestly, I know we called out Money Moicano. I know Money Moicano was supposed to be fighting Benoit Saint Denis. I think Ben Saint Denis is going to win that fight. So I think that's going to play perfect in the Paddy Pimblett's hands, and I think Money Moicano is going to be the perfect matchup for Paddy Pimblett. Honestly, when you look at the top 15, the rest of the top 15 of the lightweight division, there's probably only about 2, maybe 3 guys at most that I could possibly see Paddy Pimblett winning a matchup against. Moicano being potentially one of them. I think maybe he could compete with him. Maybe he could compete with Dos Anjos. And maybe he could compete with Jalen Turner, but I'm not too confident in that. But honestly, I think Moicano would be a perfect matchup. If Paddy Pimblett could get a win against another ranked opponent and move up, that would be great. And I think that would be a high marketable fight. A lot of fans love Moicano. And I think you could sell that as a fight night main event, or maybe even a co-main event at a UFC pay-per-view.
Yeah, I'd like to see Paddy Pimblett face the winner of Benoit Saint Denis and Renato Moicano. I mentioned that I'd like to see him fight Benoit Saint Denis, and I think that could be a fight night somewhere in Europe specifically. I think Paddy Pimblett's 2 fights away from a world championship. If he gets a win over Benoit Saint Denis and then maybe a guy like Dustin Poirier, I think that he could easily be fighting for a world championship. sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I agree with you, Brett. Honestly, Benoit Saint Denis really scares me for Paddy Pimblett. I think Benoit Saint Denis would win that fight pretty decisively, in my opinion. That's why I said if Money Moicano was to lose that fight, I think he would be the pick over Saint Denis. But like you said, Brett, if he went out there and beat Benoit Saint Denis, given the name and the cachet that Pimblett had, he's definitely going to warrant a guy like a Justin Gaethje or a Dustin Poirier after that. And if he wins that, you can already see the headlines right now with him and Islam Makhachev. He already stated that he beat Bobby Green faster than Islam did. So they're already, watering that flower right now. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see where he goes. But right now, Brett, I really think the fight to make is him and Moicano, either at the end of this year or potentially at the beginning of next year, depending on how Moicano is after his next fight.
Yeah, I think that another thing, if Conor McGregor and Michael Chandler doesn't get made at the end of the year, I saw that Daniel Cormier and Chael Sonnen this week on their show said that Michael Chandler needs to fight Paddy Pimblett if that fight can't get made. That's the biggest fight that Chandler could possibly be put in at this moment. And I agree with that. If he can't get that fight with Conor McGregor, I think Paddy Pimblett is the best thing that Michael Chandler could, the closest thing to Conor McGregor he could get, name recognition value, eyeballs on the fight, and potentially what could be, on the other end of a win. So Paddy Pimblett's got a very bright future. He's going to be facing a step up in competition significantly in his next fight. But for Bobby Green, I think this might be closer to retirement for Bobby. He's been finished pretty viciously, unconscious in the last 6 months by Jalen Turner for quite some time, especially in the UFC. But, to go out cold the way he did, he was out for a significant amount of time before the referee stepped in with that armbar. And the Jalen Turner fight was nasty too. So, I would like to see Bobby Green maybe get one more fight against a legend. I like the fight with Jim Miller. Those were two guys that were on the way out, in my opinion, and they had a little bit left to give. Maybe give him another matchup like that, but it's Bobby Green's days of fighting top contenders, in my opinion, are done.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, Brett. I would like to see, King Green retire. He's a veteran of the game, but like you said, that was two vicious knockouts. I mean, the guy's literally unconscious in the fight, and he's having his arm broke at the same time. It was pretty vicious, and then what happened with Jalen Turner was even worse. Honestly, I wish he would have just went on top and retired after the Jim Miller fight. I think that's the best it's going to get for him trying to go out on top. But yeah, I think he needs to retire. But like you said, with Michael Chandler and Paddy Pimblett, that'd be great for Paddy Pimblett. I think that's a stylistic matchup that maybe favor him, that he may be able to win. And with Michael Chandler, having, his name up those rankings so high, that would be a name that could skyrocket Paddy Pimblett up the lightweight rankings and kind of make it, I think, an easier pass for him to Islam Makhachev.
Yeah, I agree.
Our next fight, we have a lot to talk about. I think we got to talk more about what happened outside the fight than what actually happened inside the fight. We had Muhammad Makhachev, who defeated Manel Kape. Two guys that looked like they couldn't wait to put their hands on each other. But then as soon as that bell rang, it seems like they were scared of each other and turned into a pretty boring fight with low output. I thought Makhachev landed more strikes and had a couple of nice leg kicks to the head to ultimately give him the win. But honestly, this was a lackluster fight, and I really wasn't impressed with either fighter. And I think because of that, I think that played into what's going on with Muhammad Makhachev. This was the last fight of his contract, and it seems like Dana White's ready to wipe his hands clean with him. They asked him in the press conference on what his plans are with Makhachev, and he said the PFL is going to get a great undefeated fighter. So that pretty much shows you where Dana White's mindset is for this fight and for this fighter. And like I said, the matchmakers don't like him. He causes, Makhachev causes a lot of issues outside the octagon. There's rumors saying that he set up and jumped on Manel Kape. So Makhachev doesn't seem like a great guy. There's rumors that he was potentially negotiating with the PFL and using it as leverage for Dana White in the UFC contract. And Dana White doesn't like that. So if you're going to be a head case outside the octagon, you're not going to have really, really high marketable fights. Dana White's not going to want anything to do with you. We stated before, there's been a lot of fighters with that grappling style that's a little boring. You can kind of say the same thing with Mozart Ivaboyev. But he's not a head case outside the octagon. And ultimately, I think that's what made the UFC turn off of Makhachev. But what are your thoughts about this, Brett?
Yeah, I think that Makhachev needs to act like a martial artist, and with respect towards his opponents. This is two incidents that happened between him and Manel Kape, and one at the UFC PI, one here at a hotel on Fight Week. That can't happen. And I heard that he came up to him, and it was being widely reported by Luke Thomas and other people that he went up to him and asked for a photo. And when Manel posed with him for a photo, he sucker punched him and dropped him. I mean, that you can't do that. That's liable to get thrown in jail for. So, Makhachev needs to be able to control his emotions, especially during fight week. I don't know why he's going out and fighting people when he's getting paid to do it in 2 days. That was kind of surprising to me. But Dana White did look like he wanted to get rid of him. It looked like Mick Maynard and what was going on with the negotiations with Muhammad Makhachev and his team. So maybe the PFL gets him. If he does, he has to fight at 135 pounds because they don't currently have a 125-pound division. But this has been a real waste. And you have to go back to Paul Daly to find a guy who was cut by the promotion with this much hype. Paul Daly was cut after the fight with Josh Koscheck. He hit him after the bell, and Dana White cut him similarly at the post-fight press conference. Another guy from England. But that's what Muhammad Makhachev's looking like right now. He's going to have to go out and try and find work in other places, and the PFL might be the best spot for him. It's certainly not at his most talented weight class.
Yeah, and it's definitely upsetting for for me, Brett, because me, I've been a huge advocate of Makhachev. Not saying that he's an exciting fighter to watch, but I've always been a huge fan of his trajectory and potential. The kid just turned 24 years old. He's undefeated, and he really does have championship potential. I've been stating for a while that I think he can compete with Pantoja. He may not have an exciting win, but he can beat any one of these flyweights in the world. I really hope that he can get his head on straight. He's had stated before that everything that they're reported is false in terms of negotiating, and that he never spoke with the PFL, and he's practically begging Dana White to resign him. I'm not sure what the asking price is. I'm not sure if he's trying to ask for too much money. I know if he does go to the PFL or wherever promotion he goes to, the kid is talented enough to build a weight class for him. He's that good. He's that talented. And I think if he's in any promotion outside the UFC, I really think he could be promoted and sell tickets. But I really, really hope that maybe there's, some, way that they can resolve this. He really is begging Dana White. And I hope that Dana White can maybe forgive a 24-year-old for his mistakes. But given, past instances, Dana White's not too forgiving. And it looks like, Makhachev might have to fight in a different promotion, and he may not ever fight in the UFC ever again.
And it wasn't only Manel Kape that he was having problems with. I heard that Jake Hadley was saying that Muhammad Makhachev was trying to fight him at different fight weeks, and that, he was just kind of, quote, a dumb kid is what Jake Hadley was saying. And Hadley picked up a win this weekend as well, moving up to 135 pounds. He was saying, Makhachev, I'd fight you in a cage. Why don't we fight in a cage fight? I'm not going to sit out here and fight you for free in a hotel. He was asked about it at his press conference as well. But it looks like Muhammad Makhachev is lashing out at anybody during fight week, and he's a very amped up individual that needs to kind of control his emotions. And that might be because he's a young kid, and I hope that the UFC maybe gives him one more shot down the line.
Yeah, I hope so too, but I know right now it's seeming like it's impossible that he resigns right now. But I really hope, given his age, that maybe in like 5 years when he establishes himself and shows that he can be mature and be a veteran, and act like an adult, I think the UFC hopefully can consider bringing him in, because I think his talent warrants that. Yeah,
I think so too.
We had Arnold Allen, defeated Giga Jakazi. Me and you both were all over this one. Arnold Allen did exactly what we thought. He hurted Giga on the feet. Giga did land a lot of strikes, but Allen obviously was landing the more damaging strikes, which obviously led to Giga looking more beat up and having, the more bruised up face after the fight. I thought Arnold Allen looked great. I think he looked crisp. I think he was on point. I think after this fight, he's definitely going to warrant a top 5 guy. Like you said before, Brett, he was, on a little losing streak, but he lost to a lot of great fighters. He lost to Holloway, who's, a future Hall of Famer, and he lost to Mozart. So Allen's had some stiff competition, but I think he's looked great. And honestly, Brett, I want to see him challenge another top 5 guy, and I would love to see him fight Yair Rodriguez. They haven't fought before. Yair Rodriguez has a unique striking ability and style, and I think him and Arnold Allen would be a great fight. But what were your thoughts about this, Brett?
Yeah, I thought Arnold Allen looked great. He busted Giga open. Giga was bleeding there throughout the fight. The pressure of Arnold Allen was fantastic. He really ate anything Giga threw at him, walked through it, and then walked him down to the fence. Arnold Allen throws straight punches from the southpaw stance, and he looked really good. He was moving away from the rear leg kick of Giga that he's knocked out many guys with to the body. That really wasn't a factor at all. That were head kicks. He really took away the kicks of Giga by applying pressure. He didn't takedowns like Bilal Muhammad, but similarly, he pushed his opponent to the fence. Would have liked to see Allen maybe shoot a takedown or two. I thought that he maybe could have won even more decisively, but I thought this was a good win for Arnold Allen and proved that he is in the upper echelon of this division.
Yeah, 100%. We also had a lot of other great stuff that did happen on 304. We had Gregory Rodriguez, who dominated a good fighter in Leroy Duncan. He dominated him both in the striking department and the grappling department. Gregory Rodriguez, a veteran of the game, I think definitely deserves a top 15 ranked middleweight after that performance. I thought, Mick Parton looked great. He had an awesome TKO win to stay undefeated. I think he deserves a ranked heavyweight fighter, particularly since the heavyweight division is not a stacked division. I thought Nathaniel Wood and Oben Elliott looked dominant against solid opponents. And Sam Patterson impressed with a great triangle choke to win. And finally, Jake Haley looked good and a decent decision win. Did you have any other thoughts or other reactions from this card, Brett?
Yeah, I thought that the British fighters looked good. Like you were saying, Sam Patterson and Jake Hadley picking up wins. Hadley is an underdog, and Patterson beating Kiefer Crosby by submission. And that was really impressive. I think Patterson has tremendous length for the weight class, and he's somebody who we're going to have to keep an eye out for.
Yeah, 100%. Now we get to move on to the Abu Dhabi card. We got a huge main event that's going to have huge title implications. We got Corey Sandhagen going up against the undefeated Umar Nurmagomedov. Definitely a number one contenders match. The winner of this fight's definitely going to fight the winner of Sean O'Malley and Merab. Very interesting matchup, Brett. I think last week for me, because I was so confident in Bilal Muhammad, I thought last week's picks were very easy. I think that's why we nailed them pretty much. But this week, Brett, I'm all over the place. This is a really tough week to predict. I can see a lot of these fights going either way. Particularly this one. Corey Sandhagen's a great grappler, and because of that, we'll make this close. I think he's definitely the better striker, and I think he will have his moments on the feet where he does stun Umar. We've seen Umar Nurmagomedov get stunned in his last fight against an unranked opponent fighting his first matchup, and Corey Sandhagen is going to be better than that guy. But I do think Umar Nurmagomedov will be good enough on the feet, and will ultimately have the control time. I think, like I said, he'll just be good enough on the feet to keep him honest. But honestly, he's going to take this to the ground. Whenever he gets in danger, he's going to scramble. He's going to get Corey Sandhagen on the ground. I think Corey Sandhagen's good enough and will do enough to keep it from being finished. But I got Umar Nurmagomedov in this one by decision, Brett. But how do you see this one going?
I think that Umar Nurmagomedov has been waiting for an opponent like Corey Sandhagen so that he can get on the path of a title opportunity. And this is the perfect opponent for him. When you look at Sandhagen, he was submitted by Aljamain Sterling back in the day in relatively quick fashion in under a minute. Umar Nurmagomedov, in my opinion, is just as good of a grappler as Aljamain Sterling. And I think he's going to dominate against Corey Sandhagen here if he can get the fight to the ground. Now, we saw Sandhagen has an improving wrestling game that you were talking about and mentioned. He took down Marlon Vera.
Yeah, there's definitely going to be a lot of interesting things. Obviously, like you said, we know the winner of this is going to get a title shot. But honestly, Brett, who do you think is the better matchup that we can get from these two fights? Obviously, we got this and the Sean O'Malley-Merab fight. But for potential matchups, which one entices you more? You can have either Sean O'Malley against Corey Sandhagen, two guys that got similar length, or you can have two guys who are cardio warriors and great grapplers, and you can have Merab against Umar. So which one excites you more, Brett, O'Malley and Sandhagen, or Merab and Umar Nurmagomedov as a potential title match?
I'd say Umar and Merab, I believe, are they're obviously better grapplers, so that fight is not going to be as visually pleasing. The fight with Sean O'Malley and Corey Sandhagen, I think a lot of fight fans would enjoy because they're great strikers, both of them. O'Malley would be looking for the knockout, and Corey Sandhagen is one of the smartest fighters in the entire UFC and is a tactician. But, I think that the matchup between Umar Nurmagomedov and Sean O'Malley sells the most pay-per-views. I think that gets the most hype, most eyeballs watching the fight. But I don't know if that's what we come out with. Corey Sandhagen on it. He's not going to go down easily. But I do have Umar Nurmagomedov in this fight.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said, bro. I think whatever one we get is definitely going to be, exciting. Maybe not for the casuals. Umar and Merab would be exciting. But stylistically, man, strength versus strength, I think that would be an insane matchup to see, who's grappling will come out top. Merab's cardio or against the Nurmagomedov's wrestling, in high volume. But, we got a lot of other great matchups to speak about as well. We got Marlon Chito Vera going up against the veteran Davison Figueiredo. I think Chito Vera has looked poor in 2 of his last 3 fights, and Figueiredo has looked good at bantamweight. He did dominate Cody Garbrandt, who we all know Cody Garbrandt is washed at this point, but Figueiredo did look good. He may not be in his prime, but I do think at this point he is the better grappler than Chito Vera. I know Vera has some submission wins on his belt, but I think Figueiredo is the better grappler, and I think Chito's the better guy on the feet. I think Figueiredo is going to win this fight by decision. I think he'll control the fight on the ground. I think Chito Vera, starting these fights off slow is going to be a nightmare for him and really going to hurt him in this one. Chito Vera is a tough guy to finish, so I don't see him being submitted or knocked down or anything like that. So I'm going to go with Davison Figueiredo by decision. But how do you see this one going, Brett?
We're in the same spot on this one, Anthony. I break this one down exactly like you did. I've got Davison Figueiredo by decision. I think he's going to have a graft advantage. I think that he's got a granite chin. He's surprisingly good on the feet. He's very tough. He's heavy-handed. He's looked quicker than at 135 pounds than what he did at 125. I think that weight cut may have drained him a little bit. And moving up a weight class, I've got him in this one by decision. I think that Marlon Vera showed that he can be taken down in that fight with Corey Sandhagen and, kind of exploited there. And I think that Figueiredo can stand with him on the feet, maybe even land more volume and take him down. I think that this is a Figueiredo fight, and I've got him by decision. I think Marlon Chito Vera is one of the toughest guys to ever fight in the UFC. He proved that in his fight with Sean O'Malley, eating that knee. And I think he'll be able to take anything Davison Figueiredo throws at him, which is why I've got Figueiredo by decision.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said, Brett. We also have another ranked matchup as well. We got Asamat Murzakanov going up against Alonzo Menafield, 2 KO artists. Menafield's bad IQ did lead to that loss to Alberg, which I was disappointed because I did like Menafield. But I'm super, super high on Asamat. I believe that he can be a future title contender in this division. He's undefeated for a reason, Brett. And honestly, I think this is going to be the matchup that puts his name on the map and gets more people talking about him. And I think he's going to go out there, and I think Azamat's going to get the TKO win over Alonzo Menafield. But how do you see this one going, Brett?
I got it the same way as you again, Anthony. I think that Menafield made a really bad mistake against Carlos Oberg, and he got chinned pretty badly. It was kind of a flash knockout. It wasn't like he was, put completely out cold, but he is coming back here on relative short notice. That fight was in, I believe that fight was in April that he had. That was at UFC St. Louis that he fought Carlos Oberg, and he's coming back here against another killer. That chin is going to get tested this weekend against Azamat, and I think that he's going to win by knockout. I think he's 35 years old, and he's coming on while Menafield might be sliding back a little bit. Also he's 37, but to me, it seems like Azamat is really trying to become a contender, while Menafield has been a contender and is trying to maintain his position in the UFC.
Yeah, that was perfectly well stated, bro. I agree with everything you said. And I think Azamat's going to go on a tear. He's going to continue his undefeated streak. And I wouldn't be surprised if maybe a year from now, we're potentially talking about him as a potential title contender.
Yep.
We got another fight, maybe 2 guys over the hill, but definitely 2 household names. Michael Chiesa going up against Tony Ferguson. As I stated before, both guys definitely over the hump. I do think Chiesa, though, is definitely still a good fighter and probably a borderline just outside the top 15 welterweight. And And, Ferguson, man, he's on this really bad losing streak, and I don't see it ending anytime soon. I really think Tony Ferguson should retire. And I think on this matchup, I think Chiesa is going to be too much for him on the ground. Chiesa's got a great ground attack, and I think he's going to use that. And I think Tony Ferguson at this point, he is a good striker, but I don't think he's the striker as he used to be, and I don't think that striking anymore will overcome Chiesa's grappling. So I'm going to go with Michael Chiesa by submission. But how do you see this one, Brett?
I agree with you. Again, get our heads in the same spot for a lot of this card here. If Bobby Green was able to submit Tony Ferguson, I believe Michael Chiesa would be able to do the same. Michael Chiesa has a dominant ground game. He's physically strong still. He's not as war-torn as Tony Ferguson. Now, I don't think that Ferguson has the punching power or, like you alluded to, the striking anymore to keep Chiesa off of him. But Michael Chiesa is a veteran of the game. He's going to try and take him down and use his strength advantage on Tony. And I think that he's going to get him out of there by sub, unfortunately. But Tony is entering into a weird space here that nobody wants anybody to see. This is the Chuck Liddell, the BJ Penn, the Robbie Lawler to an extent. I know Robbie Lawler had a big win against Nico Price to end it, but there was a lot of losses in there that made fight fans, their stomach turn and stuff. So BJ Penn goes and gets knocked out by Yair Rodriguez. Tony Ferguson's getting finished by everybody left and right, and I hate to see it because at one point in time he was a legend of the sport.
Yeah, and honestly, bro, I think that the UFC didn't do Tony Ferguson any favors in this one. I know they try to give him another older veteran of the game to make it somewhat fair, but honestly, I think they could have came up with an easier matchup for him. I think Tony Ferguson should go out, maybe fighting a guy a lot lesser than Chiesa, and maybe a guy who is maybe not so much a great grappler.
Yeah, when these fights were announced, I really thought that the matchups were mixed up. I thought that Nick Diaz should have been fighting Tony Ferguson and Michael Chiesa should have been fighting Vicente Luque. I thought that would be more competitive. Now, one of those fights isn't even on this card, and Michael Chiesa is a near 7-1 favorite in the other. What do you think about that possibility, Anthony, and us not even getting to see the Luque versus Nick Diaz fight?
Yeah, it's definitely upsetting. Like Dana White said, he wouldn't have any faith in Diaz fighting this year, so who knows if that fight's ever going to happen. But yeah, I would wish, like you said, bro, I agree. If they would have switched up the matchups and we'd have got those matchups instead, I think that would have been more favorable for Ferguson, and I think that would give us fight fans a lot more of a competitive fight to watch.
Yeah, I think so too.
We got another good matchup. We got Shara Magomedov going up against Michel Olajaychuk. Olajaychuk is a solid, underrated fighter, as we said before. He's definitely a gatekeeper of the division. A guy who's always just outside the top 15, and always honestly a good test for some of these up-and-comers. I do think he'll be Shara's toughest opponent to date. And he's definitely the guy that you always fight right before you get a ranked opponent. So I think they're going to test Shara. And if he gets past this test, he will be fighting a ranked matchup next. Both guys are great strikers, in my opinion. I do think Shara Magomedov is taller. He's got a slightly longer reach. I do think he's the better grappler, maybe not elite, but he's definitely the better grappler if need be. Olajaychuk is tough, but is also dealing with a really bad arm and shoulder injury. So honestly, Brett, I'm going to go Shara Magomedov by TKO, and he's going to stay undefeated. How do you see this one going, Brett?
I think this is going to be an all-out war. I think Olajaychuk is one of the toughest customers amongst gatekeepers in the UFC. He's a left-handed fighter, southpaw stance. He's got big power, knockout power. He's never been knocked out himself in the UFC. 14 wins by knockout in his career. And Magomedov is coming in there to take his head off too. I think this is going to be potentially the fight of the night. I see this one going to the decision to Magomedov in a fight that I believe is going to be an absolute barn burner from beginning to end. Both of these guys are highly aggressive. They're going to come out there trying to finish each other early, and it's just whether one of them is going to be able to survive or not. I think that Magomedov, like you were talking about, the volume and length is going to matter a little bit. I noticed that he's landing 80% of his significant strikes thrown. That's an astronomical percentage and really popping off of the paper there for me. So I'm going to take Magomedov in this one by decision.
Yeah, Brett. It looks like we're going to agree on a lot of this. I do hope it's a war. Like I said, at first I was going to pick by decision, but I really do like Shara Magomedov, and I did read that Olajaychuk does have a shoulder injury, which scares me If it wasn't for that injury, like I said, I'm not sure exactly how bad that injury is. I probably would go Shire by decision, but I think Shire is going to go continue his tear. I think he's going to win this by TKO. But, bro, we don't have just UFC this weekend. We do have PFL. We got the PFL 7 playoffs. We got a lot of good matchups on that to talk about. We got the heavyweight semifinals. We got Dennis Goltov versus Tim Johnson, and we got Linton Vassell going up against Oleg Popov. To be honest, but I think this matchup is two mismatches. I got Goltov and Vassell. I think both guys are going to win by either ground and pound or submission. But what are your thoughts about these two fights, Brett? And what are your also other thoughts on some other fights on this PFL card?
Yeah, we've got guys and ladies competing for a chance at the $1 million final in the World Championships later this year. This is really exciting. I'm going to be in Nashville covering this fight this week, and I can't wait. Linton Vassell just beat Valentin Moldavsky in their trilogy fight. He's going to be fighting Moldavsky's teammate, Oleg Popov. Popov is very good and underrated himself. I do like Vassell in his experience in that one. I'm going to go and not give predictions on the fights this week that I'm covering, just out of respect for the athletes. But I do like Linton Vassell. I've covered his fights with Bellator over the last 2 years, and he is a very strong and powerful physical athlete. But the one that's really sticking off the page to me is the women's divisions here. We've got Dakota Ditcheva facing Jenna Bishop. Dakota Ditcheva is coming on and really making a name for herself as a striker, finishing girls with nasty combinations. And Jenna Bishop is a world jiu-jitsu champion and someone who's one of the best grapplers in the world. So that's a very interesting stylistic matchup to me. And then we also have former UFC title challenger Tyla Santos taking on Liz Carmouche, who is the Bellator women's champion. So I really like these women's matchups a lot, and I think that the PFL women's divisions are as strong as they can be.
Yeah, 100% agree with you, Brennan. This is definitely one of the best PFL cards of the year, and I definitely can't wait to tune in. And my eyes are going to be glued to the TV as much for this as it's going to be for UFC this weekend.
Yep, absolutely. There's even some good fights on the prelims, too.
We do also have some UFC news to bring you. UFC, like Dana White promised, he did announce the entire UFC 306 fight card at the Sphere. Just like we've been saying, we got Sean O'Malley defending the 135 bantamweight championship against Merab, which we all knew this fight had to happen. Merab was definitely the top contender on needing to fight. We finally got it. But we also got some other good fights. We got Grasso and Shevchenko for the women's bantamweight championship. That's going to be a great fight and a storyline, and a lot of fight fans have been waiting for that fight. And we also get the rebooking of Brian Ortega and Diego Lopez. That fight's got is screaming at me, and I can't wait to see that one. I was super excited for the first time, and I think this is a good showcase for Diego Lopez to put his name on the map and put himself in the true title contention. And we also get to finally get our answer to Brian Ortega. Like you said, Brett, and a lot of people were worried, can Brian Ortega return to 145? We thought his days at featherweight were over and that he was moving to lightweight for good. But Brian Ortega decided to do the UFC a solid and have another fight at featherweight and give us a great matchup with Diego Lopez. But what are your thoughts about this fight card, Brett, now that it's official?
Yeah, honestly, Anthony, I think this is a loaded top-heavy card, but honestly, I wasn't impressed with the depth of the card. We have Ode Osborne leading off the main card, and Zell Huber's a great fighter. But I thought that this could have been a packed and loaded card. Dana White promised us the best fight card that we've ever seen, or fight event that we've ever seen. I guess not fight card, but I guess we'll see with the millions of dollars they're putting into production. And obviously the Sphere is going to be an incredible sight to see, but with everything they've got going on. But, I thought the card could have had a little bit more depth. Maybe we have some fight added.
Yeah, I agree, Brett. I was definitely disappointed with the depth of this card. I was expecting something better. When Dana White hyped it up the way he did, I was expecting to get a UFC 300 card. Maybe not that deep, but definitely a little bit deeper than what we thought. There's definitely some interesting fighters. I'm definitely excited to see a guy like Zell Huber fight. So that's going to be interesting to see. But like you said, Brett, I thought we'd maybe get, maybe another ranked matchup and another high marketable fight to go along with the 3 fights you stated. So, especially when you compare it to some of these other UFC fight cards that we just had or the ones that we got coming up. Honestly, Brett, I like UFC 305 better that we got coming up in 2 weeks. I think that fight has more fights to be excited about. I'm real excited, obviously, for Sean O'Malley fight, but outside of that and Diego Lopez and Shevchenko, there's not any fights that are really going to get any, especially the casuals, out their seats to pay for it. But like you said, maybe it's going to be more along the lines of what the UFC shows us and what maybe they got behind the scenes more so than what the actual fights. But, the last topic that we got for tonight, some news that, came about, Islam Makhachev does have an injury, and it may require surgery. And it looks like that's the direction it's heading in. And if he does have to have surgery, he's pretty much not going to be able to fight the rest of 2024, which is definitely upsetting because UFC definitely wanted him and, Arman Sarukian to fight at Abu Dhabi. So now this kind of changed a lot of UFC's plans. It looks like right now, if Islam can't fight for Abu Dhabi, that they would probably have Ilia Topuria and Max Holloway for Abu Dhabi. Ilia Topuria said he prefers that. He thinks he'll have a lot more fandom with the fans in Spain being in Abu Dhabi. So Topuria favors that. And I think if you can't get Islam and Arman, I think that's the best matchup to make. Honestly, I'm more excited for Topuria and Holloway. Anyways, so that would be a great replacement fight, which definitely leaves in question, what they would decide to do for UFC 307 because that's going to be left without a main event now. But it's unfortunate for Arman Sarukian. He's going to have to wait a longer time. I guess he doesn't have to do the video now for the anti-bullying video now. He could just wait his turn. But it's going to be interesting to see, Brett. Usually in these cases, sometimes we see an interim belt. But right now, there's not a guy that can fight Arman Sarukian, I think, for an interim belt. There's not a contender. Gamrot's already booked. Justin Gaethje's coming off of a loss. So right now, it seems like the UFC has no choice but to wait until next year to have this fight, Brett. But what do you think?
Yeah, maybe they should make Muhammad Makhachev do that anti-bullying campaign too that they had Arman Sarukian do. But I know with him being out, I know he's suspended for a little bit of time there with what happened. I think that's going to work out perfectly, with the timing. If they have to have Ilia Topuria and Max come in and, fill a card, that's the best fight for me in the rest of the calendar year. That's the one I want to see most as a fight fan. I think that there's just a lot on the line in that matchup. So that's a great one to replace Islam Makhachev with in the Middle East. But if he does have to go and get the injury taken care of, I think that now is as good a time as ever with Arman being on the sideline a little bit.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said, Brett. Fight fans, that's everything that we have for today. Definitely make sure to tune in next week. We'll be bringing you the next episode 7 next week. Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to be breaking down everything that happens at the Abu Dhabi card and the PFL card. But definitely, most importantly, make sure you're following Puncher's Chance Podcast on all social medias at Punch ETB. Make sure to follow the Empty the Bench Podcast Network on Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at ETB Network. Make sure to follow our YouTube channel at youtube.com/ETB Network for all of our shows and all of our other ETB Network. If you can't watch Puncher's Chance, then make sure to take us on the road and listen to us wherever you could go. But thank you, fight fans, for tuning in. Sorry for the technical difficulties, but we can't wait to bring in fight fans, and I hope you guys enjoy the great fights we have this weekend. See ya.